Hi, my name is Sydney. Thank you for watching my video today. Today I'm recording a video to share my near-death experience, out-of-body experience, validation of afterlife. Not sure how it will resonate for some, but I think there is some possible different outcomes for different people hearing this story. I wanted to kick off with a little bit of background. So what prompted me to make this video: a few days ago I was at dinner with my mom and husband. My husband's mom recently passed away. She did pass away suddenly, and a family friend of ours gifted us a book, and my husband's been reading this book, and it shares some near-death experience, some validation of afterlife. And one of the stories in there was a lady that was born blind, and she had a near-death experience, and after her near-death experience was able to describe Jesus word for word, picture perfect. Every image you've ever seen with him she was able to describe, although she's never actually seen him. Never seen a picture of him or anything like that, given the fact that she's blind. So him sharing that story at dinner then prompted my mom to share a few stories. My mom did have a near-death experience also when I was in high school. She threw a shower of clots to her lungs and died on the laundry room floor. She said that when she passed, she was given the option there if she wanted to come back to life or if she wanted to pass over. She did choose to come back to life, hence why she's here today. She also showed that her mom had a near-death experience. So my grandmother died on the operating room table. And at that point in time, my grandma was walking with one of her friends that had accidentally shot and killed himself. And as they walked through this really beautiful field, and they got to this road, and my grandma saw my grandpa, who had actually also already passed away, and at that point in time he told her it wasn't her time and that she needed to go back. So hearing those stories at dinner did get me thinking about sharing my own experience again. This is my 6-year anniversary of my near-death experience. We had dinner on September 25th, and my near-death experience started on September 26th, so it was just the very next day after dinner. But the more I think about it, the more I think it may be time to share. I do want to caution, this maybe is not the most exciting near-death experience that you've heard, but I do think there's a lot of good things, even out-of-body experience, as well as validation afterlife. So I hope that by watching this you'll find something meaningful for you. Everybody sees and hears different things in their experiences. But I'm feeling the need to share the story, like somebody needs to hear what I have to say. And if even one person finds meaning in watching my video, I think it will be worthwhile sharing this story with all of you. I do want to open up letting you know that there could be trigger warnings in this video, so things like suicide will be covered, mental health issues. Obviously this is about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. Also things like braided souls or walk-in souls. I think all of you that have had a near-death experience have experienced some sort of fashion of PTSD, so possibly a PTSD trigger warning as well. I think it could be a trigger for a lot of things, so I do want to open up with that and let you know just in case. Also, this is my first take of the video. I'm not sure how many times I will record this. Maybe this is my one and only. Maybe I will do many attempts at this. We'll kind of see where things take us. But for now, this is the one and only I plan on making. Also, I do apologize in advance. I don't plan on editing this video at all. So if it is a little choppy or things go awry, I apologize in advance. I just don't want to edit it. I'm really not that skilled when it comes to that. So what you see is what you get today. I also do want to warn there may be some kind of clutter in this. I'm going to say everything that I remember that I think could be meaningful for somebody. So to some it might seem like extra detail, to others it could be really meaningful. I'm also using this like as an attempt to document my story. It's been 6 years now, and I was really scared that if I didn't share it I would forget it. And in the past few days, I realized that that's not the case. Like when I started thinking about it, the details came back and they were very vivid still. But this will be pretty much everything I can think of regarding my near-death experience. I hope that I don't forget anything. I'll do my best to share everything, but if I do find that there's something I forgot, I'll be sure to make some sort of sequel video or include it in comments or provide some sort of commentary there. I'm also going to do my best not to cry. This is very emotional. A lot has gone into this. A lot of things happened. So very personal and very emotional. So I apologize in advance if I cry, but my goal is to not cry during this video. And thank you for affording me the opportunity and being the ears to share my story. I got to thinking about this and I've never shared this story start to finish. I just have never been afforded that opportunity before. I've shared bits and pieces as they've been applicable or as people asked, but I've never really taken it start to end, which I'm going to do today. So thank you in advance for being those listening ears. Even if you do know me, you'll probably learn something from this. Again, it's very personal and just not all the details have been out there prior to this moment. So really that's what prompted me, is those conversations recently. And the more I got to thinking about it, I feel very sad for those who have lost their loved ones and they think that they're gone. It's more of a transition, so I'm hoping that this can shine some light on that. Just because your loved one has passed away, it doesn't mean they're gone. So that kind of carries us through the intro. I also am taking notes, like I made an outline the last few days, so if you see me looking down or pausing, chances are it's just making sure I didn't want to miss any details. I don't want to move off of one topic and then come back to it if I can. So bear with me if there's some hesitation, or again, if I'm looking down looking at notes, that's what I'm looking at. So to give a little bit of backstory, my near-death experience happened when I was 22 years old. It happened in 2016. This was an afterthought, but I did write it in my notes here. It's interesting that this happened when I was 22. I was very reckless growing up. I partied a lot, I drank a lot, I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. And I used to tell people all the time, it'll be a miracle if I live to be 21. So interesting that this event happened so close to the age of 21. I don't really believe that there are any coincidences in life, so I'm sure there is some definite meaning behind that. But what prompted my near-death experience was an asthma attack. Growing up, I had really bad asthma. There were multiple times where I in and out of the hospital. I had oxygen at home. I had a lot of breathing issues as a child. And then as I grew up, they kind of went away, but then it came back with a vengeance. I woke up one morning very short of breath. I do use an albuterol inhaler, which is like a rescue inhaler. So I was using that and it wasn't helping at all. I did call my mom, and my mom came and picked me up and took me to an urgent care that was near our house. In that urgent care, I remember laying next to a guy, and urgent cares aren't the fanciest place. Typically it's just a sheet between the two of you. So I was laying between, or I guess there was a bed on each side and there was a sheet between us. And the guy next to me was having a heart attack. He was obviously in distress. He was in a lot of pain having the heart attack. And my end, I was struggling to breathe. The nurse came in to let us know that they had called an ambulance for me, which is fine. So they were just going to move me to a hospital because they didn't feel like they could effectively treat me. Well, as things went on, the ambulance for the gentleman next to me that was having a heart attack, his ambulance came first, and they decided that they wanted to send me before him. So I actually ended up taking his ambulance to the hospital. With something like a heart attack, they were feeling really comfortable that they could stabilize him where they couldn't stabilize me. So I did get moved to a hospital, and they tried basically everything they could. I remember doing lots of different things. They were trying to take blood and it was really difficult. They were trying to get ABGs and it was rather difficult. I remember at one point in time they had put me on helium because I guess helium sometimes is easier to breathe than room air because it's lighter. So they were trying really everything they could. I got to that urgent care at about 8 a.m. and by 2 p.m. I was in the hospital in ICU. My husband got off work and he said by the time he got there, my eyes were rolling into the back of my head and I wasn't making sense. I wasn't like conversating anymore. It wasn't clear and I had like checked out at that point. I do remember laying there and like the lady trying to poke me, trying to get the ABGs, and I remember like asking her like, have you ever missed before? Because an ABG is pretty painful, they go in pretty deep, and I totally jinxed this poor lady and she's like, no, I've never missed before, and then she tried to get an ABG from me and wasn't able to do it. Granted, with blood gases, it's not always easy, especially for somebody that's in distress like I was. Right around that point in time, I remember my dad coming in with some balloons and candy. I don't think he realized how serious it was at the time. And then I remember them coming in and asking me about wanting to be resuscitated. So sorry in advance to my poor mom. By this point I was very in distress, very uncomfortable. I had never had to try so hard to breathe ever in my life. So when they asked me if I wanted to be resuscitated, I told them no, if I die, just let me die. Not knowing that it would be so serious and that I was actually going to be fighting for my life. At that point in time though, they realized that I wasn't like doing well and I didn't have I wasn't allowed to make medical decisions for them. So at that point in time, they like revoked my power to make decisions for myself, and granted it to my mom, which again, I was being kind of a smartass and being sarcastic and not knowing that I was actually going to be fighting for my life. I was just really tired and didn't think anything of it. But the nurse kindly explained to me that healthy 22-year-olds do usually want to be resuscitated and don't usually want to die. So they were a little off-put by that whole scenario. But then from there, it just kind of escalated. They did what they could to keep me off the vent, but I wasn't getting enough air. I wasn't circulating air. So I did end up getting put on paralytics. So they did put me into a paralyzed state as well as they sedated me. So they put you sometimes into a medical coma. So they did paralyze me and put me into a coma and put me on the vent. So I was on full life support then for the next 8 days, starting with that incident. A lot of things happened while I was, during those 8 days, a lot of different medical things. Like to this day, they did a ton of lab work and they still don't know what triggered this event. At one point in time, I had very low blood pressure, like to the point where they could consider me legally dead. It was so low. So from there, they did everything they could to stimulate my heart. And at one point in time, they almost sent me into cardiac arrest. My heart rate was so high and my heart was pounding so hard for so long, like 72 hours straight. I had a heart rate of close to 200. So being very low and then them trying to stimulate it and then not being able to bring it back down. Like I said, they thought that there were a few times they were going to send me into cardiac arrest. There was also a point in time where they thought they had collapsed one of my lungs. And then other weird anomalies happened, like the ventilator I was on, for whatever reason, mechanically it failed. And somebody had to manually come in and bag air for me. So lots of things happened during these 8 days. I feel bad for my family that was there to experience it. And part of me is grateful that I was sleeping through it, even though I don't know how much I actually slept, but I realized there were a lot of things that were challenging for my family to see during this period. So then there is another backstory that happened even prior to this that's really important to the story. So I had a childhood friend and we became friends in middle school. In middle school, I was overweight, I didn't do my hair and makeup, I didn't have very many friends, and he was pretty much my only friend. In high school, I did make a few more friends, but for the most part, he was basically it. Kids are mean and he was nice, so he was pretty much my only friend growing up, and he did end up jumping off a building and killing himself in 2012. So we graduated high school in 2011, and a year after we graduated high school, he did end up killing himself. Very sad. I had a lot of guilt with his passing. I felt bad because oftentimes he was my only friend, and I felt like I should have supported him when he needed somebody and I wasn't there. So I've always had a ton of guilt around his passing. There were a lot of times where I would like go and lay on top of the building that he had jumped off of and just lay up there and cry. Now I won't go anywhere near the building. Like, I went there the last time and that was it. But obviously now I'm still very emotional talking about it and even thinking about it. So super challenging for me, and I don't think I ever fully got over him passing. It's something that bothered me on a daily basis. So a little bit of backstory with him passing away. He is a very important part of the story that I have to share with you today, so just keep him in mind as we move forward. There's a few things though that I want to say about it. His favorite color was purple, and that's going to lead me into my next thing. So many of you probably know when somebody passes away, they do leave signs for us oftentimes, and you might find something like a flower on the ground that makes you think of this person, or you see a certain color, or you hear a song on the radio, or you see a time on the clock all the time. Oftentimes people find feathers, or they see butterflies. Actually, the ICU nurse is the one that told me about that. When you see a butterfly, oftentimes that's your loved one saying hello to you. People find coins on the ground, or they see these people in their dreams. So I'm very fortunate that after his passing, I feel like I've always gotten signs from him whenever I needed them. The building that he jumped off of downtown, I did take flowers and leave them on top of the building. And this was the first time I went to visit him there. And I took a bunch of purple flowers, I set them up on the edge of the building. And as I was driving away, I had my windows down, and one of the flowers actually blew back into the car through the window and landed on my lap. So I've always kept that flower with me. But now anytime I feel like I am having a bad day or I'm looking for a sign from him, I always find things purple. So that day going forward, I always find purple flowers, and I know they're from him. The odds of that flower blowing off the top of the building into my car window and into my lap, it's just unreal. Again, I don't believe in coincidences. I mentioned that earlier. But a couple random examples that I think are worthwhile sharing about purple flowers in the future. When I was really young, probably like 20, I worked at a bank. I had slowly but surely been saving money. I didn't come from a very financially savvy family. We didn't have a lot of assets, so I've always worked hard to try and better myself and make sure I have enough money. I had a family member reach out to me and ask me if they could borrow money, and it was a small amount of money. It was like $4,000 or $5,000, but at the time I was only 20 years old, and that was basically all the money that I had. And I did agree to lend them this money. They were looking to rent a house, and with this new house they could have a new job, and it was really a good move for them, so I did let them borrow the money. And I basically gave them the money without looking at the house or really asking any questions. And later that day I was walking through the backyard of this new house that they were able to rent with the money I had let them borrow, and there was like a bushel of fake purple flowers. Totally random, no other fake flowers anywhere around. I asked this person if they had seen or noticed them, and they said they didn't, and they had looked through the backyard and didn't notice them earlier that day. So that was an instance of me finding purple flowers. A few years back, I was trying to buy a house, and the state I live in, the market's very competitive. We looked at like 44 houses, submitted offers on 11 houses, and finally we got a house. I wasn't sure about the neighborhood or location though, so I was a little hesitant on the house that we finally got. But the bedroom happened to be painted purple in this house, so I knew that that was the sign. There would be times where I would be driving home, and there are a few songs that I associate with my friend that passed away. And like if I'm ever had a bad day at work and I'm crying on the way home, one of these songs would come on the radio. So always knowing that things are there. I find purple flowers all the time. Really anytime I need guidance, I need support, I'm looking for direction, I get some sort of sign from him that will be okay, which is greatly appreciated. I hope all of you that are seeking afterlife validation do also start finding those signs if you haven't been already. I want to talk about, outside of the purple flowers, related to my friend's passing, I do want to talk about the songs a little bit. There are 3 songs that anytime I hear them, I know for a fact that it's him letting me know it's okay, connecting, touching base, whatever it may be. But there was a song that he sang me all the time growing up, and I never like thought anything of it. He was really goofy, totally class clown, joked about things. Some of the things that he thought were entertaining were just like odd. So I don't know, this is interesting, but the song is called Crossroads by Bone Thugs and Harmony. If you've never heard it before, you probably have. It is on the radio. But it talks about meeting somebody at the crossroads. And my entire life he sang me this song. And I never noticed. I was totally oblivious. But as we get further into my story, you'll find that he met me at the crossroads. I don't even know if he knew he was telling me that. But it was his soul's way of kind of telling me along the way that we were going to meet at the crossroads. But he sang me that song all the time, and just recently did I even think about the lyrics. Like anytime I heard the song, I knew it was him, but I listened to the lyrics and what the lyrics were saying, so I feel like there was another message there that until recently I didn't even understand he was telling me every time he was singing me this song. But so that should be the background you need to know. So that's how I ended up on my near-death experience. It's very important. My friend that passed away, very, very sad. Obviously, I'm sad about that still today. And then some of the signs that he showed me along the way will become very important. So as we move forward, remember my friend, remember the purple flowers, and remember Crossroads. So those will all come up again a little bit later in my story. And I do apologize. I'm trying to make this story as orderly as possible. I hope it does come off that way. So I've kind of chunked up events in ways that I hope make sense. But we'll see how it goes. You can always give me feedback on this video, but I had to organize it in some fashion, so I hope it's meaningful. So now I want to take some time to talk about the experience. So during the 8 days where I was on life support, something interesting happened, which I think is different than maybe some other stories you'll hear. But I remember having a dream, but I also remember having spiritual interactions. And the way that I think is most meaningful to explain this is my brain was dreaming while my soul and my spirit was having interactions on the other side. Looking at that transition, interacting with other spirits. So I'll kind of break those two down and give a little bit more explanation. When I was coming off of the medicine too, definitely I feel like there was some like hallucination dreams or coming to consciousness. So I'm going to talk about those too, although they're kind of strange. But again, they could be meaningful for somebody, so I want to share anything that I think could add value in somebody's life. So I'm going to talk about the dream, the spirit interaction, as well as maybe what we could call hallucinations as I was waking up. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is the dream. I am going to be completely honest, it's very strange. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Very few details resonate with me, but I did decide it was something I wanted to share because maybe one of you can tell me that there's more meaning behind it, or maybe there are meaningful things happening that I'm just not picking up on. So in 8 days, I only remember having one dream. I think that dream did last the entire time I was in the hospital. It was very vivid. It was very real life. I don't know that time is a real thing, but it seemed to match time as well. Again, it doesn't make any sense to me. I can't find a lot of hidden meaning in it. Maybe one of you can explain that for me. But again, I'm going to put it out there. So my mom used to live on a cul-de-sac, and she had a sunroom on her house, and we didn't spend a ton of time out there, but we did occasionally. There was furniture and plants. And in my dream, I dreamed that there was a pool, an in-ground pool installed in the sunroom, and in her house there's not a pool inside or outside. And for whatever reason, we were having this huge party, like huge party, a huge pool party. And it was so big that like Bud Light was even there sponsoring it. So there was Bud Light stuff everywhere. There was a Bud Light truck parked in front of the house. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't really drink. I especially don't drink beer. I'm not a Bud Light drinker. So again, super weird. I have no idea why that came to mind. But I was inside the pool, and I remember what I was wearing. I could kind of like see myself there. I had a yellow bathing suit on, and I ended up getting in the pool. Everybody was drinking Bud Light, having a great time, and I did actually start drowning. There was a large ball, if you can think about like an inflatable ball that's large enough for somebody to walk in, like those ones that people tumble around in the field in, those inflatable ones. It's about that size, but it was made of material like a kid's play set, like on a playground where they used to be very thick, like cable type rope. So it was a ball made of that type of material, and somehow I ended up inside of this ball, inside of the pool, and I was like vigorously trying to chew myself out of this ball because I was drowning. And I remember there were people trying to cut me out of this ball also. So I ended up like I was basically drowning and people were trying to save me. It wasn't until a few days after I came off of life support, came back to life, talked with my family and stuff, did they tell me that the ventilator I had been on failed. I'm not sure if the timing coincides with that, like maybe the vent failed and I stopped breathing, so hence why I had a dream where I couldn't breathe and I was drowning. I have no idea what that means. They did end up getting me cut out of this ball. Everything was fine. We went back to partying. I remember seeing the Bud Light truck in front of the house. And then, for whatever reason, I ended up slipping and falling at this pool party. I was running on the tile near the pool, and I slipped and fell and hit my head. So when I woke up in the hospital, I thought I was in the hospital because I had slipped and fallen and hit my head. I had no recollection, at least early, about having the asthma attack. Of course, as I came to my senses and kind of woke up from everything going on, I do remember not being able to breathe previously, but initially when I woke up, I thought it was because I had slipped and fallen and hit my head at the pool, the non-existent pool. So, a super strange dream. Again, I have no idea what it means. Maybe it's meaningless. Our brains do wander though. So to me, if nothing else, this was just my brain being my brain. Your brain doesn't die till it dies, and it always is making things up. So, super weird dream. Now I want to talk to you about the spirit interactions that happened, and the best way I can explain it is it was happening at the same time. So like my spirit was off doing things while my mind was having this dream. And I will say, unfortunately, my spirit interaction may be a little dull or not as exciting as some NED experiences you've heard. Oftentimes you hear people saying that they were given a choice to come back to life. They got to meet the Maker. They saw heaven and how beautiful it was. They saw their loved ones. I don't remember any of those conversations. I want to clarify because I do think that they happened. I just don't remember them. I think there are times where your body protects itself, or your mind protects itself, or your spirit protects itself. So I think they did happen. Unfortunately, I just don't remember them. But I do want to share what spirit interactions I remember. And the best way I can explain it is like my spirit was kind of floating around the room. So I wasn't attached to the body, but I did see a lot of other individuals that were also not attached to bodies. The majority of the people that I saw didn't mean anything to me. Like I saw a Hispanic lady that had a split on her forehead and she was bleeding. And I just kind of stared at her and she stared at me and we didn't really talk. Typically, they think that would be something that would startle me or scare me. But for some reason, she wasn't scary. She wasn't mean. We were just kind of passing by. And I'm not sure if these spirits I saw were also people that were in the hospital that potentially were in the same transition state. Maybe they were people that had died in the same hospital room as I did. Maybe they're people from my past life. I'm not quite sure, but in current life, I don't recognize who this woman was. I also saw 3 triplet babies, but I don't know anybody with triplets. I remember looking at them closely, trying to figure out who they were. Again, they were looking at me, I was looking at them, but it didn't connect to me who they were. And then I do remember there was another African American gentleman that was like behind my bed, so standing behind me the entire time. And he was just kind of leaning on the wall with his foot up against the wall. Occasionally he would switch feet and he would rest the other foot and stand with the other foot. And he was there the entire time. He was also not scary, very kind. I assumed this was like a nurse or a caretaker. There was like a very protective energy associated with this person. I didn't think anything of it. Like I said, maybe this was his old hospital room. Maybe he worked at this hospital. So I saw the spirits. Again, I don't know what state they were in. I don't know what it means. And unfortunately, I don't remember any conversations. I've talked to a lot of intuitive people and mediums, and they say when you're in these near-death experiences, a lot of PTSD happens, and not to compare that to somebody that's been to war or had some other sort of trauma, but your spirit is exposed to a lot. And sometimes you're just not able to see your own records. So again, I feel like the conversation probably did happen. I probably did see what I needed to see. I just don't remember the conversations outside of seeing those spirits. So that takes us in to my next section here, about waking up and some of the hallucinations I had. Again, maybe these are not hallucinations. I believe they are. When you're put on full life support, you are put on a lot of sedatives and paralytics and those kind of things. So a lot of heavy medication. And I kind of remember dozing in and out as they were weaning me off of these medications. So I think these were more hallucinations from the medication, but again, I'm not ruling them out. Maybe there's something more meaningful. Again, I decided to put them in this story because who knows, maybe it will be very meaningful for one of you. But one of the first things that I remember of in-person, real-life interaction, sorry to my mother, but one of the first things I asked is where my husband was. And she told me that he had gone with his brothers to go duck hunting, which is really usual. He's a very avid hunter. I do want to clarify, at this point in time when he left the hospital, he knew I was going to survive, and he felt like I was never going to wake up if he stayed and waited there. So it's not at all the fact that he was leaving or should have been there and he wasn't or anything of that sort. By that point in time, they knew I was going to be okay. But when she told me that, I was like, okay, he's duck hunting. And then I had a very weird vision that went along with it. I did 4-H growing up as a kid, and I remember being at the fairgrounds and seeing him inside of a semi-truck trailer, and he was in there like cutting off the ducks and geese's heads, which is not at all how you duck or goose hunt. So it was a very weird kind of vision, but she told me he was gone, and then I went and saw this thing. Another weird thing that I remember that happened is there were like showgirl can dancers, and they were dressed up in red and black outfits, but it was like a kaleidoscope type view. And this is so strange, but it started like in a belly button, and the belly button turned to eyelashes, and the eyelashes turned to these beautiful girls dancing, but it just kept going. So like back from the belly button to the eyelashes out to dancers. And I watched that for a long time. I don't know how much time, obviously, given my state. But But it was just a really odd thing to see. I don't go to Vegas shows. I don't really, not attached to dancing in any fashion. So it was a really interesting thing that I saw. Again, I'm chalking these two things up most likely to the drugs that I was exposed to in the hospital. They joked that I was on the Michael Jackson cocktail, so a ton of very, very heavy drugs being used during this time. There were times where I would like rub my forehead and I remember like feeling crystals, like I was sweating out drugs and medicine from all the different things I had been on. So not to rule it out. Outside of hallucinations and just waking up, these weird things that I was seeing, I do want to talk about just some of the other things that happened waking up. Again, these are probably more on the personal side. Maybe they'll resonate with some of you, maybe they won't. But a lot happened in a really short period of time. So I do have listed just a couple bullet points of other things that were happening as I was coming out of this. One of the things is I could not wrap my head around how long I had been asleep for or how long I had been on life support for. I asked the date so many times, so many times, and I did it for a few days until I could really just start to grasp what was going on. Like, so much time had passed. Another thing that really caught me off guard was the nurses and doctors knew everything about me and everything about my family. Granted, they had been spending time with my mom and my husband and talking the entire time while I was on life support, but like, it was weird that I woke up and they knew my mom's name. It was weird I woke up and they knew my husband's name. So for whatever reason, that really caught me off guard. They knew so many details about who I was, what I did for work, what my hobbies were, details about my family. They also joked, which this is terrible, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but when I came into the hospital, I had a full face of makeup on. My hair was done very pretty. It was curled. I had all of my eyelashes on and full face makeup. But it was getting colder and I hadn't shaved my legs. So one of the nurses was constantly joking with me about my not shaved legs. Like, my face and hair was so done, but then my legs were quite hairy. So that was an ongoing joke that they had. So just strange things like that. I do also want to mention that when I came back to consciousness, it was like I had never seen things before. I saw so clearly and so beautifully. The day I woke up, it was really gloomy. It was raining out. They were tearing down the building next to the building of the hospital I was in. It was really not a pretty sight, but yet it was still like the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was like if you had never seen before and you were seeing again. I want to touch on something here really quick, but I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far. I did speak to a medium several years after this experience, and she told me that she believed that I was a walk-in soul. For those of you that don't know, it could be worth a Google. And more specifically, I was a braided soul. And really what that means is one soul leaves the body and a new soul enters the body, or sometimes they get kind of tangled up together and then you have two souls. I'm not saying that this did happen. Some things indicate that it did, like seeing for the first time. I felt like I had looked at things for the first time ever. Again, not a rabbit hole I want to go down, but maybe we'll see where this takes us. Maybe this warrants a different conversation. But I did want to mention the braided soul and the walk-in soul. Some of you that might have some answers you were looking for. Another really silly thing that happened is I told you I was dead set that I was at this pool party and slipped and fell and hit my head. I remember the first thing I did was like check under my little robe and see if I was wearing a yellow bathing suit, because I really genuinely thought I had slipped and fallen and hit my head at a pool party and ended up here. Which was not the case. I did not have a yellow bathing suit on, but it was one of the interesting things that as I was waking up, I checked for my yellow bathing suit. The very first thing that anybody said to me, so before I even had conversations with my mom or anything of the sort, one of the nurses walked in and grabbed my leg And she was like, "Oh, honey, I'm so glad to see you. You've been knocking on heaven's door. I'm glad you decided to come back." And it, for whatever reason, has always really stuck with me. I think it was because I just didn't understand what had happened, but very, very memorable. I will never forget her voice or the words that she said to me. I was also very confused, thinking that I had slipped and fallen and hit my head at a pool party, not knowing I had been on life support and almost died for the last 8 days. But it was just something that was interesting to hear. Another really weird thing that happened is I remember looking down at my bed, and when you're on full life support, typically they chain you to the bed, so like your hands and feet are chained to the bed. And I remember looking down and like seeing my hand, and I didn't think it was my hand because the hand was very swollen and engorged and very fat. And I remember thinking, whose fat hand is that in the bed? And it was my fat hand that was chained to the bed. So another distinct thing that stuck with me is seeing my hand not moving for those few days, though results in lots of swelling, and same thing with medication. So the swelling is gone, but it was just so weird to look down and be like, that's not my hand, but it was indeed actually my hand. So I think that's going to take me into my next section. I was really confused or unsure where to put this piece, so I apologize if this flow is not right. But I wanted to talk about some recovery things. Similar to a lot of the things I just shared, it's things I feel like I need to say. However, please do not stop listening right now, because actually the most important thing of all I have to tell you is still to come. So the next section after this is actually the most important thing. But I did want to touch on some pieces of recovery and just share various experiences that happened there. One of the things is just like healing. It was very slow. It took me forever to get better. I was very weak for a long time. I was on heavy quantities of steroids for a very long time that led me to have very vivid dreams. I had a very changed perspective on life. Literally, even the way I was seeing things looked like I had never seen them before. There was a lot of contention in my family. My parents were divorced prior to this experience, but they've always been very civilized. They could be in the same room. They got along well. And to this day, I'm not sure what conversations happened between them, but it was very uncomfortable. They went from being fine to basically hating each other based on some things that had been said while I was on life support. My husband did lose his job at the time because he obviously didn't leave the hospital for 8 days, and his employer did not have an understanding of what was going on. And even 6 years later, I still feel like I'm working to get healthy. Every year I want to post something and be like, the strongest I've ever been. And I just haven't hit that point in life yet, unfortunately. So working on getting healthy every day, but it is a slow process, unfortunately, once you have something major like this happen. So then the rest of this is just totally random, and I'm just going to throw it out there because I wrote it down and I felt like it needed to be shared. One of the funniest things that happened in the hospital, and there weren't many funny things, after the nurses had given me such a hard time about shaving my legs, I remember I'd finally been walking and moving around, and they're like, okay, you can shower on your own now. So my very first shower, it was like, can you please give me a razor so I can make sure I shave my legs? And she was like, you're not going to be able to. And I'm like, I'm going to, so you can stop talking about my hairy legs. Well, I got in the shower and I was like too weak to even stand. So needless to say, I didn't shave my legs. But one of the strange things that stuck with me over the years, back to the topic of me being very weak. In the hospital bed, you have like a little remote that sits your bed up, down. You have a call button. And I remember one day being in the ICU and needing something from one of the nurses, and I didn't have the strength to actually push the button down. So just to give you some perspective, even at a young age and being really healthy, so weak after being sick for 8 days. They say for every 1 day you're down, it takes, I think, 3 to 5 days to get that strength back. Definitely feeling it. Sometimes for elderly patients or people that are very ill, they have like a balloon, an easy squeeze type of call button. And even when they gave me the rubbery kind of squeeze push ball one. I didn't have the strength to even squeeze that one. So just perspective on how weak and how much of a major toll this has on your body. I was on a feeding tube. I was on the feeding tube for quite some time. Just really like you forget how to eat foods. They put you through swallow studies to make sure you're chewing food and swallowing correctly. Also, when your energy is so low, it takes a lot of energy to eat food. So I did spend quite a bit of time on the feeding tube, which reminds me, I apologize, I said I wasn't going to try and do this. But part of chewing through that rope ball in my dream where I was drowning, they did mention that I had chewed through a tube that was in my mouth. So some connection to real life and that dream state, but in there I was trying to chew out of the rope ball, and I did end up chewing through some tube that had been in my mouth in the hospital. So feeding tube just made me think of that. Some of the recovery stuff though, like I remember my first day of physical therapy and thinking they were going to make me stand or do a sit-up or do something of that sort, but at that point in time I couldn't even hold my head up. Like I was like a baby with a heavy lopsided head, like no neck strength, no strength to even sit up. And my first physical therapy requirement, or I guess program, was to do finger push-ups, which is just like moving your fingers around and getting strength back in your hands, which absolutely blew my mind. I just didn't realize how major of a toll this had on your body. So that in itself was very eye-opening. I also went through a period of time where I was very scared to fall asleep. They did have to medicate me for several days following to actually get me to go to sleep. For whatever reason, I had this irrational fear that if I fall asleep that I was going to die. Obviously that's not how this story played out, or that's not how it happened in the first place, but you're not always thinking logically in these situations, so I did have a fear of falling asleep for a short bit of time after. I did have PTSD, which that was part of falling asleep. Still a lot of trauma happens in these kind of things, whether you remember them or don't. I did have bruises everywhere too. Obviously I was on blood thinners because I was bedbound. Lots of bruising on the body. Also I did have a PICC line into my heart. That was very mind-blowing when they took that out finally when I was getting ready to go home. I had no idea that there was a plastic line going from my arm all the way into my heart. I did also have a central line put into the artery in my leg. I am glad that I don't remember that because I am sure that that is a horrible, horrible experience. So I did have a central line in my leg and a PICC line in my heart. And then I do remember having an abundance of energy. Like every day I woke up and I wanted to run a marathon, but in reality I couldn't even like pick food up and eat it. I couldn't raise my arm to my mouth, or things like brushing your teeth were impossible. I did spend quite a bit of time walking on a walker because you're a fall hazard after these type of events. So definitely a lot of recovery, healing, things happening there. A few other random situations that I wanted to share. So there was a respiratory therapist that came in to see me, and it was an older man, and I of course had no idea, but apparently he had been taking care of me for quite some time, and he just seemed odd. Like he had an odd smile on his face. He was very positive. It was just such good energy. And I remember him giving me a nebulizer treatment and then leaving the room, and I looked at my mom and I was like, why? Like, did he always smile like that? Like, it just seemed weird. It felt weird. And she was like, no, that's typically he was really quiet, didn't have much to say. And she was like, but he's probably excited that you're still alive. Like, this person came in and saw you when you were unconscious and not doing well. So that really hit home, all these people that had followed my journey without me even knowing. There was also a lady that came in and cleaned the floor. Again, I was in ICU, so I did spend the full 8 days on life support, but then I was there for close to a month also, not in the hospital, but in ICU specifically. And there was a woman that came in multiple times a day and cleaned my hospital room floor when you're in ICU. things like contaminants on your shoes and stuff like that can be detrimental. And one day she came and she was mopping, and I had been coherent and back to my normal self for a few days, and we struck up a conversation for whatever reason, and she was like, I'm really sorry if these cleaners bothered you. I've always worried every time I come in here that I could be like bothering you because I know you're having a hard time breathing. And I told her it was fine, and she was like, this is the first time I've seen you awake. But it's interesting because she, similar to the nurses, knew exactly who I was, but I had never seen her in my life before. And I told her, and she was like, oh, I come in here like 3 times a day. And I was like, I've never once seen you or interacted with you. So she was another person that knew who I was, but I had no idea who she was. And I remember her being quite shocked, like it shook her to her core that I was like, I haven't interacted with you at all or seen or recognized you or anything. So she just thought that I was conscious but not speaking. So it was a very interesting situation. So that one has always stuck with me too. Another unique thing that happened, I actually wore this necklace specifically because of it. So this was the necklace I went into the hospital wearing. It's just a heart-shaped necklace that my husband gave to me. I don't really wear it very often, but I did put it on today specifically for this video. Probably can't see it very well. But I did go to the hospital with this necklace on, and you see there's quite a bit of room here. My mom at one point in time referred to me as the Star Wars character Jabba the Hutt, which is the very large, swollen individual in Star Wars. But I guess at one point in time my neck was so swollen that they thought that they were going to have to cut this necklace off, which is just crazy to think about because you can see there's quite a bit of space. But again, when you're sick and not moving, and those medications cause quite a bit of swelling. I did also ask my mom if they had taken any pictures, and I remember both my mom and my husband being really appalled by that, which for me, I didn't get to see it, so I was curious, but it made me realize how scarring this was to them and how damaging it was to them. And even to this day, we don't really talk about it. I feel like they saw a lot, they lived through a lot. Well, you can say that I was sleeping, so I know that they saw firsthand things that I did not experience. But it was very eye-opening when I realized what kind of trauma and impact that this had on them as well. So I think that takes me into the next section, which this is the section I'm most excited to share with all of you. So I hope there are still a few of you listening. I apologize, I think this video is pretty long, but this is where it gets good, I promise. So I'm getting healthier, I'm off of life support, I'm getting back to normal. I understand the date, things are looking up. I was sleeping one night and I finally realized that the person that was standing behind me in my spirit state, so the African American gentleman that was standing behind me, I finally realized that this was my friend that had committed suicide. So I had been off the vent 2 or 3 days, no sedation, no paralytics, no meds. I was sleeping, and again, my quality of sleep at this point in time isn't very good, but I was sleeping, and this woke me up out of my sleep. Because the same place where I explained that he was standing behind my head before, in my dream I saw this person standing there again, and it just shocked me. And my friend that killed himself loved the clothing brand South Pole. If you're not familiar with that, you probably don't need to Google it, but there was a certain brand of clothing that he wore all the time. And I noticed that this person standing behind me, relaxed, 1 foot on the wall, 1 foot on the ground, was wearing South Pole, and like it just woke me up out of my sleep. I immediately started crying my eyes out, like full on bawling. I cried to the point where the nurse came into the room trying to figure out what was wrong with me, but it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized that he had stood there the entire time with me while I was going through all of these things. So I just was in shock. I mentioned before, I was so emotional when he passed away, and I was so devastated about the thought of never seeing or hearing or talking or interacting with him again. And he always gave me these signs, but it never like hit home. I just never thought I'd see him again. So when I saw him, I was overjoyed with emotion. Like, I feel like it was the closure I had been waiting for by seeing him standing there. So again, the nurse came in. Luckily, she was very understanding. I gave her some background on the story. ICU nurses are angels here on earth. They see and hear it all. So I feel like there was not anything that I could do that would faze them. And I explained to my mom too. My mom is well aware of the situations and the signs and that sort of things that I've gotten from him. So explaining to her that that was who I saw, and it was seriously one of the most happy and blissful moments in my entire life. Like, it was such a relief to know that this person had stood with me and had been there. His birthday is actually the 27th, so my second day on life support would have been his birthday. He stood there even through his birthday. I realized in spirit form you have endless energy and you can be multiple places at once, but I was really, really touched that he had been there the entire time, and it means more to me than I can ever put into words. And crazy enough, I know I mentioned the song earlier about meeting at the Crossroads. It just blows my mind to look back at this now and be like, oh, he sang this song to me my entire life, telling me that he would meet me at the Crossroads, and he totally did. In this transition state where I wasn't sure what was going to happen or where things were going to go, he was there. So I know like this sounds good, but I promise you don't stop listening now either, because it's going to get even better. Of course you can stop listening whenever you want, but the most meaningful thing I have to say to you is still yet to come. So a few days pass after this super blissful moment. I am super happy, and then all of a sudden, and I don't know why still to this day, there was just like a shift, and all of a sudden I wasn't happy about this anymore, and I started questioning, maybe I'm just crazy, maybe this experience changed who I was, maybe this is hysteria, maybe this is mania, maybe none of this is real, maybe I just made this up because it's what I wanted. I at this point in time just thought I was crazy, and I remember laying in bed one night just crying, thinking that I had totally lost my mind at this point. So all of the good feelings had gone away, and I'm not sure what prompted me to do this, but I'm so glad I did. I remember laying there and I'm like, okay, I literally have nothing to lose. I already think I'm crazy. I am going to ask my friend that killed himself for validation, and just see what happens. And I had no idea what I was going to get next, but I just asked him for proof. I asked him for proof that it was him standing behind me, and I was so upset at the point I was like, I want validation on everything. So prove to me that it was also you that leave me purple flowers and all these signs. Like, I need you to validate everything, both that happened before the hospital and now that I'm in the hospital. Again, not sure what prompted me to ask for validation, but I'm so glad I did. And what I asked him for, I was like, you can show me anything purple. Purple has always been our color. That was his favorite color, the purple flowers. Anything purple connects me back to him now. So I remember telling him, you can validate this for me with anything purple. My mom's favorite color is also purple. Maybe she'll come to the hospital wearing a purple shirt. At this point in time, she had been going to her house to sleep and stuff because she had slept in the hospital for a very long time. I was stable and there was no reason for her to be staying overnight and being uncomfortable. So I'm like, maybe my mom will come to the hospital in a purple shirt. Maybe there will be a nurse that comes in purple scrubs in the hospital. Each of their scrub colors mean different things typically. Maybe they're going to make me get up and walk and I'll see a purple sticker on the ground. This following day was also the first day that I got to get taken off the feeding tube and got to order food. So I was like, maybe they'll bring a purple napkin with my lunch or with my meal. And I gave him all these options. I was like, literally anything purple. It could be the smallest thing, and I will take any sort of sign that you can provide to me. I would have taken anything at this point. I was so unwell. I went from being on such a high to such a low, questioning everything. So much had happened, obviously. You're coping with all the thoughts and starting to realize all that had happened. but asked him for validation on being there in the hospital and all the purple signs I had gotten to from that point. So I feel like this is where the story gets really good, and for those of you that are questioning if life after death occurs, I hope that this provides you the validation that you need. I hope you start looking for signs. I hope you see signs from your loved ones. But here goes. So I ordered my food the very next morning. I did finally get some sleep after that very emotional time. Like I said, I laid in bed and cried and cried and cried and begged for some sort of validation from my friend that had passed away. And I was pumped to order food. You have to keep in mind, I was probably 14 days in now without having food, between being on life support and then being on the feeding tube. So this was my first day in about my first meal in about 14 days. And I have always struggled with my weight growing up. I'm a chronic dieter, but I had promised the doctors that I wasn't going to try and diet. I was just going to eat the calories and the carbs. When you're recovering, your body needs any source of energy it can get. So I did agree to them that I wouldn't be trying to eat diet food, and I would eat nutritious, filling meals that would provide my body with energy. So I ordered French toast and bacon. Seemed like a solid first meal on my way back. Super fatty in both, wouldn't typically eat it, but again, we were trying to eat on the heavier side just to give my body any extra energy I could get. And I was so excited for this meal. And as you can imagine, without eating in 14 days, all you want to do is eat. So the food finally does get delivered to my room, and there was the validation that I needed. The nurse brought my food in, set it down on the little table, and I let it sit there for a while. You're really weak in this state still. Like, it was still a lot of work to like use a fork and a knife and to move your arm from your plate to your face. So I kind of just let my food sit there. Probably 5 minutes went past, and finally I was like, okay, I've like built up enough strength. Now is the time for me to take a bite. And when I took the lid off of my food, because you know they come like with the plate and the cover over it, there was a purple flower cut, just one purple flower perfectly in the middle of my French toast. And at this point in time, I lost my mind. I could not believe that it was the validation I had asked for. I was seriously hysterically crying again. The nurse came in. These poor ICU nurses, they see and deal with it all. But I was just sobbing. I couldn't believe it. It was the most amazing thing, I think, to this day that I've ever experienced, and I probably ever will experience. To think you saw somebody, then feel like you're questioning yourself, and then to receive validation, and let alone for it to be a flower in a hospital room. I'm closed in this little tiny room. I've been in here for days. There's no possibility of anything happening. So to get a flower of all things absolutely blew my mind, because again, I was thinking my mom would have a purple shirt on, I'd get a purple napkin, anything, and it actually ended up being a purple flower. So I was crying hysterically when the nurse came in. She heard me crying. In ICU, they work just a couple patient rooms at a time. They keep a really good eye on everybody. And luckily she was super understanding. Obviously she's seen a lot of people pass away in ICU and has seen and experienced a lot of things in general with ICU. So I explained to her the meaning of the purple flower, and I was begging her to go through my stuff to see if she could find my phone to take a picture of it, which she said she couldn't go through my personal belongings. It was totally fine. And then I asked if she could take a picture of it and send it to me, which she said again she couldn't due to HIPAA violations. Totally fine, but at that point in time I just sat there and waited for my mom. I think my mom came like 60 or 90 minutes later, but my first meal I just let it go cold. At that point in time I didn't even care about the food anymore. It was so important to me that this flower had come in my food, and I wanted to take a picture of it to keep forever. So truly a life-changing moment that had happened. To this day, I'm still in disbelief sometimes, like thinking back on this story, and how I was in such disbelief there. I will never fully understand how he managed to provide a purple flower of all things, not anything purple, but to provide me a purple flower is the most treasured thing you can possibly think of. I did ask the nurse some questions too, and she was like, they don't typically put flowers in food, especially somebody in ICU, because they're in such an unstable condition. So a very, very unique situation. But then that takes me to the next piece of this. So I literally could not ask for anything more in life. That was everything I possibly could have wanted or needed ever. But the plot thickens. It gets even better. So when you're in the hospital, a lot happens, and I don't know if any of you will relate to this, but a lot of times you think certain people will be there for you, and in reality they aren't there for you. But then the other happens also, where people that you don't think will be there for you will be there for you. And there was a girl that I was really, really good friends with for a very long time, and we had a major falling out. I'm trying to leave names out of this entire video in general, just because. But we had a major falling out. Friendship didn't work out. We parted ways. But when she found out I was sick, she would call and text my mom all day, every day. She was devastated and heartbroken and wanted nothing but to come into the hospital and give me a hug. And so as I got healthier, my mom told me that this girl had reached out and told me how she was feeling, and how she would just call and cry and cry and cry and cry and beg to come in to see me. But my mom knew that we weren't friends anymore, and she wanted to be respectful of that. But she was like, I really think you should let this girl come visit you, because she has been your #1 advocate. Which is fine. So I did agree to let this girl come in, and we are great friends now. I actually recently got married, and she was one of my bridesmaids in our wedding. So we've had our ups and downs, but this did mend our relationship. But when she came in with another guy that I had been really good friends with as well. And they brought me this beautiful set of flowers, and it was red and white roses. It had a lot of baby's breath and greenery in it. It was absolutely stunning. They were my first visitor. We weren't really letting people in because my condition was so unstable and I was in such critical shape. But they brought me these beautiful flowers. I cherished my time talking to them. It was such a great experience. And there was a little counter off to my right, the right side of my bed. They put the flower arrangement there. They told me that they had picked out the flowers by hand. The guy had actually picked them out. So all red and white roses, baby breath, greenery. It was stunning. Came in a really nice vase. I still have the vase to this day even. So fast forward a little bit. Now to the day after I asked for validation on seeing my friend that had killed himself, seeing him standing there with me, seeing all of the signs he's ever provided me in life. I get the flower in my French toast, which is amazing. And then the day after that, I look at this flower arrangement my friends had brought a few days ago, the beautiful red and white flower arrangement. And all of a sudden, there are huge purple lilies in this. The roses are dying off, the greenery is dying off, the baby breath is dying off, and there are huge purple lilies. And I turned to my mom and I said, did you bring me those flowers? Like, where did those purple flowers come from? And she swears she has nothing to do with it. I asked the nurse that heard me hysterically crying and heard the purple flower story if she had bought some and tucked them in there. I had asked the cleaning lady, and nobody can explain how red and white roses now turned into these beautiful purple lilies. I called the two people, I called the guy and the girl that brought those flowers to me and asked them again about the arrangement and if they had maybe tucked any lilies in there, and they swore they didn't. So not only did I get the purple flower in my food, then another flower arrangement I had mysteriously also ended up with purple flowers. And to this day, I'm just genuinely shocked. I'm speechless when I think back to this event. It was the ultimate validation that I could possibly ever ask for. Again, I'm not really sure what prompted me to ask for validation, but I'm so glad I did, because it was life-changing to see this come through and see it all come together. And again, to get purple flowers into a hospital room that is basically on lockdown in ICU, to get a flower in my food and then have a beautiful arrangement of flowers on my counter. There's just no way other than to describe this. absolutely the validation I needed and confirmation from my friend that's passed away. So mind-blowing. I am trying to not show too much feeling or emotion in this, but I like overflow when I think about talking about this. But again, I just don't want to cry, so I apologize if this seems coarse and I don't seem that interested in it, but it is absolutely the most beautiful thing that's ever happened in my life. And I hope that all of you can understand why this is so unique and how some of these things that don't add up, it just proves that he was validating and that he was there, and our loved ones are always giving us signs. So just wanted to express all of those things. Seriously, disbelief. So beautiful. To this day, I still don't understand how, but I don't question things anymore because I've already questioned and received the validation I needed. It was double confirmation. It was double validation in the most extraordinary and exceptional way possible. This is a weird kind of follow-up note that I made for myself that I do want to touch on. When my friend was standing behind me, the African-American male, I never saw his face, and this is what I think initially, I knew it felt homey, I knew it felt like a caregiver, I knew it felt protective, but it wasn't until I was sleeping did I then look at the clothes and then realize it was him. And I will say there was some times where I was really upset about this, and I was like, why did I not see his face? And that really bothered me for a while. And I've done some research and I've talked to some intuitives and mediums, and there's similar experiences out here, and they say oftentimes these people won't show their face because you will see them and then you make the transition. So you die because you're so excited, you're so overwhelmed that you saw this person that you just go to them, which I think absolutely makes sense in my scenario. I mean, there were times where I contemplated killing myself because I wanted so badly to see and talk to this person again and be with this person again. So it makes sense to me now why I didn't see his face, because I absolutely would have gravitated towards him, and that probably would have ended my life and I wouldn't have a near-death experience. I would have just passed away. So it was kind of protecting you. It wasn't your time kind of thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That seems odd also, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I did know it was him. I knew it was his spirit, but I didn't see his face. But I think it was the fact that he was trying to tell me it wasn't my time. It was so I didn't make the transition. And I do see him in spirit state. He does still have a face. I know I've been asked that before. He absolutely has a face. I just didn't see it during this situation. I see him in dreams and those kind of things. So he's very well there. It was just covered, I believe, protecting me from myself in this scenario. And then this kind of takes me into some last closing thoughts. A few other random things I think is really important to think about. I have emotionally struggled with this near-death experience a lot. It's something I've gone back and forth with just a lot over the years. I've thought about it a lot. I've asked a lot of questions. I always ask why people had near-death experiences. And unfortunately, if you Google it, there are a lot of doctors that are like, they just happen, it doesn't mean anything. And I feel like typically there is a lot of meaning behind these kind of scenarios. I still don't know why mine happened. I do believe it was closure. It was seeing my friend again. I needed to know that he was there. I needed the validation. I needed the experience. I really needed the closure on this situation because it was something I thought about so much and I felt so much guilt on. Another possible reason, again, I'm not confirming, I'm just kind of throwing ideas out here, would have to do with the walk-in soul. So a lot of times there is a car accident or some sort of traumatic incident where the souls can then transition. I don't know if that's why this happened. Maybe I just needed to share this story with some of you. Maybe some of you needed to hear that there is life after death, and I was the one that could provide you with that. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Still figuring out what my reason was, but just a few of the potential reasons of what it could have been. And then closing thoughts, thank you for hanging out with me for this long and being the ears. I think this video is significantly longer than I thought it might have been. But this is the end of my story for now. I'm sure there's something I forgot to share, and if I do think of anything, I'll add it to comments or create another video clip. Thank you again for being a listening ear. If there's anything that you want to share, please do share your experiences with me. Share your thoughts. I know I said some really weird things and a lot of them don't make sense to me, but if they resonate with you or you see meaning in them that I'm not seeing, absolutely please do share with me. And then feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I may or may not have the answer, but if there's any details that I missed or things extra that you want to hear, let me know and I'm happy to connect and answer any unanswered questions. But thank you again. It means so much to me that you listened to this entire video, and I hope that this is valuable to at least one person.